Hey guys, today we're going to be speaking about the competitive advantage and barriers to entry. Basically, what this means is that what aspects of company X in a certain industry make it better than its competitors, and how hard is it for a new competitor to come into that specific industry? You want to start off, Steve?
Yeah, let's talk about competition. So if you listen to a lot of these, I don't know, CEO influencers and these type of people on competition, they often try to say like competition's healthy, it keeps you on your toes. I don't really subscribe to that, in the sense that I think the complete opposite. Competition is the enemy. You're looking for a market where you're mostly a monopoly, that's close to a monopoly without the government coming after you. That's what you're looking for. If you want to take an example, take Google. No one rivals it. I have never heard of anyone that uses Yahoo or Bing to make searches online. So it dominates the market in that sense, and that's why it's a company that has such attractive returns.
And I would say that moves on to network, because Google is up there because of the network as well. I use Google, I have Gmail. Wow, Gmail provide free emails, and they provide like Google Drive, for free with a 50 gigabyte or how much you have, whatever you have. So it's part of the network as well. So going into the network effect, what are people using more? One good example of this is Facebook. So Facebook became big. There were other social media platforms before, but it became big because people started talking about it, and it provided much more value to the overall network over time. I think they tie very well together, both competition and network.
Yeah, it's like with Facebook. So the more people use it, the more valuable Facebook is as a product. So in the sense that if it's growing, if there are a lot of people using Facebook, it doesn't make sense for you to join another social media platform because all your friends and family are chatting on Facebook. So if you start your Facebook too, there's going to be no one on that. You can apply the same thing on Airbnb. Like, why would you put a property on a new website where not many people are frequenting? You want to put your property where everyone is going and everyone is trying to rent a place.
Yeah, exactly. So where there's passing traffic sort of virtually in the essence, I think another important point coming back to it is that these innovative companies, it's always very important to check if whether or not they have patents or not, because a patent can definitely be, a very inviting thing to see as an investor, especially if it's something which is going to generate huge returns. So for example, if an organization had a patent over some high quality battery which can return 1 million miles, obviously that's gonna be obviously impress investors. So I think having a patent over there also is a very important thing to look out for when you're investing in a company.
Yeah, definitely. I would say maybe even on scale is quite important when you're trying to compete. If, let's say, imagine you want to compete on the tire market. So who are the big competitors over there? You have like Michelin and Goodyear and these. So they probably have a system where they can produce tires at very cheap rate costs. In the sense that if I had to go and make my own company and compete with them, it would likely be the case that I would produce these tires at a much higher and at a much more expensive rate. So I would have to charge much higher prices, and no one's going to buy maybe my tires. So it might be difficult to compete.
Yeah, you won't have the same efficiency as a well-established organization as a startup. So obviously that's a massive barrier to entry as well.
And it matters differently for different businesses, right? So some in the production side, it can be the case. Maybe in the tech side, it's easier to just go out and compete, because generally all you have to do a lot of times is make a website or an online product like that.
That's true. And to continue on the tire example, something else that ties in really well with the tires, like the tire industry, is regulation. Let's take to actually produce tires, you have to have X regulation in terms of how much pollution you're putting out in the factories. So there might be a lot of regulation around it, and that's probably one of a competitive advantages for the companies already in that industry, but also a barrier to entry. I take the banking industry. The banking industry is a very tough regulated industry. So the barriers to entry for new companies in the banking industry, such as a new bank, is very tough. That's why you don't see many modern banks that have their own, actual bank behind them. Like Revolut uses, I think, Lloyd's Bank in the back end. So there's a lot of regulation that goes into it. So that's a competitive advantage and also a barrier to entry, like I was saying.
Yeah. Yeah, it can also stretch to things like components for aircrafts. That's a big one that needs certification. So let's say a company like Boeing that makes planes, it buys all these parts from suppliers, and these suppliers have to have very strict certification that takes many years to apply for and even qualify for. And it's very difficult to get the certificate for any new companies, So a company like Boeing will just go straight to these same suppliers all the time. And that's why these suppliers do very well. They can continually raise the prices, knowing that Boeing has to come back to them because other competition can't get that certification, Then we can talk a bit on resource monopolization. I think it's maybe not that common, but sometimes it is the case, especially when, let's say, one of the things you need to make your product is quite rare. So, for example, something like in batteries, lithium is now a big resource because it's very important in the battery making process, and batteries is an industry that's exploding quite a bit. Now, lithium is not something that is that common, apparently, So to find actually, it's also something like steel where it's produced everywhere, and you'll find it at attractive prices, So that is why you see companies like Tesla actually buying mines that
produce lithium,
that produce these resources, because they need that security of that resource. But it gives them an advantage if, let's say, other competitors can't really find their lithium, and then that could give them an advantage.
Yeah, in fact, the limited resources, it's actually mined from the ground. They're called rare earth metals. So obviously, since that is limited, if Tesla have X amount of quarries, then they'll have a competitive advantage over other companies. Yeah, that's sort of comes on again to high capital expenditure costs, Dave. At the end of the day, I think one of the biggest discouraging things for a smaller organization, and what can really put an organization sort of on a pedestal, is how hard would it be for an organization to enter that market and compete. So, like, for example, the battery industry, if you're mining for rare earth minerals or metals, it's going to be very hard for a smaller organization to compete, just because of the large amount of capital expenditure an organization would need to even compete in that area.
Definitely. I think a really good example for this is, let's say, the telecom industry. So for companies like in Malta, you have Go, for example. So if you think that they have badly priced products, maybe you can come up with something better. However, you remember that they have cables across the entire country. So if you want to connect everyone, you have to go and make your own cables across the entire country, and that's very expensive. So that's why we're unlikely to see anyone else come to compete with a company like Go or Melita or Vodafone in Malta.
And usually what happens with something like that is that if a new company comes into play, similar to what Melita had done, they had contracts with Vodafone and Go to use their infrastructure because it's so expensive to start. So the service would probably be a similar price because at the end of the day, they have the infrastructure.
Yeah, for sure. I would also say distribution channels. So distribution channels is how you're getting your product to market, how you're selling it. Okay, so if you're just selling it online and the customer is not really picky on any particular kind of brand, it just goes on your website and then buys it from your website, and that's maybe not the best sort of distribution in sense of how likely they are to come back. But let's say something like, imagine the insurance model. So to buy insurance is a bit of a complex product. You want to talk to your broker, discuss what's best for you. So over there, you tend to have relationship-based models where someone would know their broker for 10 years, 15 years, a long time. And they trust them blindly, and they don't even want to compare prices against other competitors. They just go to their broker, and they know that their broker is going to sort them out somehow, So if there's a new insurance broker coming to town that is trying to win over clients, it's likely that a lot of the clients out there that are already using brokerages are not even going to want to consider changing because they have that relationship. Yeah, then maybe talking a bit about branding as well. I think that's quite important. So, I mean, every company really has a brand, but when a brand becomes a competitive advantage is when that company can charge more for an equal sort of product. So, for example, one of the key things you can compare is Apple and a company like Xiaomi. So, I mean, technology-wise, they probably can make quite a similar sort of phone. I mean, I'm not that much into phones, but I mean, how different can it make?
Sometimes even Xiaomi makes a better phone in actual like hardware-wise. So
that's the thing. Yeah. I remember I had bought a Huawei phone for like 99 euros, and that's everything an iPhone. But that's the thing, the brand is so powerful. People so much want to own an iPhone that they're willing to spend like €1,000 to buy that iPhone. So that means that they can make much higher returns.
And the brand becomes like a religion as well for some people, like you wouldn't change no matter what. And I think that also goes into switching costs in terms of even let's take the phone industry. I mean, switching costs is something that the phone industry, in terms of Apple, Samsung, and all, they're trying to make it harder for people to switch in terms of services. They try to tie you in with content, with contracts, basically, in terms of, store our photos and back up your stuff with us on our online services. So when you come and use our, Word or whatever the competitor is, the Word product or Excel, so you're stuck into their ecology, basically, and basically switching costs would be a lot of time. Same for the insurance, like you mentioned before. I mean, in insurance, the switching cost might be too high to actually switch. You might have to cancel a contract, pay off a fee. Switching cost is a big thing.
For example, imagine you have all your family cars sort of reinsured with one insurer. And obviously, it's easy to have a sort of build that relationship with your insurer. So even just having that relationship with a company on a business level would make it harder for the consumer to even think of switching to a different insurer, for example.
What might be helpful is to compare it to something that doesn't have a switching cost. So imagine like a supermarket. If I go and I can buy from one supermarket one day, it doesn't mean that I have to go another day to buy from that supermarket. I'm probably just as likely to say, I'll go to this other supermarket, whichever is closer, whatever.
And same to social media. Social media is the same thing. I mean, switching costs is nothing. If a better social media platform comes up, you just switch. You just open an account and you're done. One last thing to mention, I think, is location. You want to take it over, Steve?
Yes. So location matters a lot when it comes to where the location is within the city, if they have stores. So, for example, imagine you have McDonald's and, I don't know, Burger King competing in a city. Where are their stores located? You have to see, are they located in the city center where there's a lot of traffic? Is it more on the outskirts? Is it in malls? Because malls are, in the US, for example, not doing very well. So you'd rather have a chain that has its shops all in nice, attractive areas than if it has them in malls and places like this, And I think it also matters in more niche situations where location matters quite a bit. So let's say for the automobile industry, services provided to car companies, they need to be very close because there's a lot of service that needs to be provided to them, and you need to transport the pieces of this car to this other factory that's going to provide the service on this piece of metal or something, and then get it back. So it really needs to be close. So if you have, if they're in good proximity to the actual car company in this case, they have an advantage over other competitors in this case.
And this is one thing Apple does really well. Apple places its stores in the best locations in the world always. They, no matter even they're losing money from that store, they place it over there because it's marketing. They build a nice store. People take photos, share it on Instagram, Facebook. So location ties into branding very well. Similar to Nike, like you said. Nike. Let's take Nike. I mean, Nike has some of the best locations in the world as well. You see the stores; they're all wow stores. That's what you can say. Exactly. So. Yeah, I don't know if there was anything else, guys, from your end. But if there wasn't, basically...
Maybe to just wrap up one last thing, as in, it's nice looking at what advantages they have right now, but you've also got to see how's it going to play over time. So a lot of people assume that, they have an advantage that's going to last, but it can break down so easily. So in 5-10 years, that's a reasonable time frame to see no more advantage. Because the industry gets turned around on its head or something. So you have to see where is it going, maybe can even strengthen their competitive advantage. Your best chance at really, really good returns is finding a company that might not have an advantage now, but is subtly under the rug, just kind of generating that competitive advantage. So for example, maybe if you saw Facebook in its early days, maybe it wasn't that much used. but you start to see, look, they're increasing the number of users very quickly, and if they continue at this rate, eventually they will have a competitive advantage.
Similar to the car industry. Take Tesla. I mean, it was like, just electric cars in the last 10 years. But I mean, everyone's moving to electric cars now. So they do have a huge competitive advantage over the Volkswagen, over the BMWs, or Hyundai, Toyota, everyone else,
For sure.
I guess that's all for today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. And if you have any questions, ask on the group.
Yeah. See you.